Late at night, the piercing sound of a crying baby emanated from the stables situated at the rear of Arian Vincent's property. Vincent had meticulously laid numerous traps outside his premises. He found it implausible that someone would bring a baby here at night, especially with the presence of wild animals lurking around the nearby mountains. He quickly surmised that it must be someone trying to break in and rob him. Without hesitation, he retrieved his trusty axe from the wall, where it hung alongside a taxidermy mount that showcased his hunting prowess. As he contemplated the situation, he talked to himself. If they came to rob this place, they're out of luck because they're dealing with a seasoned hunter. Vincent cautiously made his way towards the rear of the stables, as he had a feeling that this was not an ordinary person. This individual had managed to avoid all of the traps set outside the property, which made Vincent all the more suspicious. Nevertheless, he was certain that he had heard the sound coming from the stables, and he knew that his ears did not deceive him. Vincent stood outside the stables, ready to strike quickly and catch the intruder off guard. He charged towards the door, forcefully knocking it open, only to find that there was no one there. Doubt began to creep into Vincent's mind, and he thought to himself, "Perhaps I'm hallucinating, as I was told we couldn't have a baby." However, before his doubts could fully take hold, he spotted a sleeping baby nestled in the hay near the window, wrapped in a clean cloth. Vincent was shocked, but he took the baby close to his ear and listened to its heartbeat, relieved that it was healthy and alive. Suddenly, Vincent's wife Olena heard some commotion and headed towards the stables, covering herself with a cloth to shield against the chilly night air. As she sleepily walked through the stables, she asked Vincent about the noise. Vincent was taken aback, as he had left his wife sleeping when he went out. Vincent turned to his wife and asked if she had woken up. However, before she could answer, Olena noticed the baby in Vincent's arms and exclaimed in surprise, "What? A baby?" Vincent became nervous and started to stutter as he tried to explain to his wife, but eventually managed to say, "It seems like it's our child." Something magical happened then. His closed eyes opened and he shook his hands. The wind blew and the clouds started to gather. Soon after, rain fell from those clouds. The dried-up land started to glisten and the village people sang songs of joy. He also started to protect the village from outside threats. Because of his mysterious powers, the village found peace. No villagers went thirsty or hungry. However, the village people did not have access to scientific research. The people thought his powers were mysterious, and he was called a mage. Vincent addressed his son, asking, "Are you reading a book, my son?" The boy, whose name was Sharon, closed the book titled The Story of the Kind Mage. Sharon was 12 years old at the time, while Vincent was 40. Sharoni was Arian Vincent's pride and joy. A big grin lit up Vincent's face as he made his way over to Sharon, and without missing a beat, he scooped him up, playfully currying and spinning him around. "My little champ, I've gathered enough wood for our feast. Let's head back home and chow down together." Sharon looked up at his father with eager eyes as Vincent gave him a peck on the cheek. "Dad, I'm curious about something. What do I need to do to use magic?" Vincent was taken aback, realizing that the book he had given Sharon was about magic. He thought to himself, "Oh, so the book I gave him was about magic." Vincent was taken aback, realizing that Sharon's curiosity had been piqued by the book he had given him. After gathering his thoughts, he tried to explain. "Well, son, isn't everything kind of magical? I mean, with just one arrow you could take down a bear, and with one swing of an axe you could fell a tree. Isn't that kind of like magic?" Vincent chuckled as he finished, hoping his words would satisfy Sharon's curiosity. As they approached home, they passed by a field where kids often played. Two of the kids, who knew Sharon, saw him coming with his father. One of the kids exclaimed, "We always ask him to play with us, but he's always buried in his books." The other chimed in, "What's with that huge book? Do you think it's all a lie and he can't even read it? And have you noticed how scrawny he is? He doesn't look anything like Mr. Vincent." Vincent felt a pang of anger at the child's words, but then things took a turn for the worse. The kid continued, "My mom said he's not their real son. His real parents abandoned him because he's weird." Vincent was caught off guard by the hurtful words of the children. Vincent struggled to compose himself. Though his initial reaction was to lash out in anger, he knew better than to engage with ignorant and cruel children. All he could do was turn to Sharon with a heavy heart and a deep sigh, feeling the weight of the hurtful words. Sharon, who was still caught up in Vincent's earlier lesson, cheerfully asked, "With one strike to a tree, it's magic, right?" Unaware of the cruelty of the kid's words, Sharon's happiness was a balm to Vincent's heart, but Vincent couldn't shake off the feeling of pain. Vincent turned to his son and said, "Sharon." The boy replied eagerly, "Yes?" Vincent continued, "Since you helped Dad today, let's go to the city tomorrow. I'll buy lots of your favorite fruits." Sharon's face lit up with joy at the prospect. Despite the hurtful words of the children earlier, Vincent knew in his heart that Sharon was not his biological son. Nevertheless, he loved him as his own and wanted to make him happy. He thought to himself, "No matter what anyone says, Sharon, you're my son," as he lovingly patted his head. Sharon's curiosity about magic only grew stronger as he clutched his book tightly, his face beaming with excitement. All he could think was, "I want to know more about magic." On the next day, the sun was shining bright, and Vincent and Sharon took a carriage to the rural part of the kingdom of Thormia, called Creas. As the carriage entered the city, Sharon leaned towards the edge of the seat, taking in the bustling city which appeared so lively. It was Sharon's first time visiting the city of Creas. The carriage eventually stopped at a street that resembled a marketplace. While getting off the carriage, Vincent said to Sharon, "Sharon, while I finish my work, you need to wait for me at Martin's grandfather's shop. And just in case, don't go into any dark alleys or run into any nobles, okay?" He showed a worried expression, but he knew his son had never gone against what he said. Sharon replied with a smile, "Yes, I know, don't worry." As Vincent went about his business, he couldn't help but steal glances back at Sharon, hoping for his safety in the bustling city. Sharon, on the other hand, was having a blast assisting Martin's grandfather at the fruit stand. He scribbled prices on pieces of wood with paper sticks, showcasing his impressive handwriting skills. Martin's grandfather was taken aback and exclaimed, "Oh my, you write so well! Thank you, though you didn't have to." Sharon interrupted with a beaming smile. "It's okay, I want to help." Martin's grandfather couldn't help but be amazed by Sharon's intelligence, thinking, "Despite his young age, he's quite sharp. Unlike my mischievous Martin." He let out a sigh just as Sharon called out, "Grandpa, Grandpa!" As Martin's grandfather was about to write, he asked, "Do you know what magic is?" However, he didn't hear Sharon's question properly, and mistakenly thought he asked about food. "Eh? We should eat?" Sharon replied with an unabashed face, "No, magic! What do I need to do to be able to use magic?" Martin's grandfather chuckled and said, "Ah ha ha, you're talking about magic?" He thought to himself, the timeless fascination of children with dragons, warriors, mages, and arrows. Sharon eagerly looked at Martin's grandfather, his face beaming with excitement. His eyes sparkled as he anticipated Martin's grandfather's response. His hopeful expression conveyed his eagerness and anticipation. Martin's grandfather replied, "I don't know much about magic either, but if you're looking for books about it, there are lots of them there," while pointing through an alleyway where a bookstore stood at the end. Sharon's eyes lit up with excitement at the mention of the bookstore. Martin's grandfather told him, "Do you want to go? Look around for a little bit and come back." But Sharon was already sprinting towards the bookstore. He replied, "Really? Then I'll be right back," as he dashed off. Martin's grandfather picked up the magic book that Sharon had left behind while he went to the bookstore and chuckled to himself. "Ha ha, when I was young, I used to read these children's books too. What a trip down memory lane." He eagerly flipped open the book, but what he saw inside was completely different from what he had expected. He exclaimed, "Eh? What's this?" The contents of the book were far more complex than he had anticipated, and he couldn't fathom how a child could read such intricate material. Then he remembered Sharon's earlier question and said to himself with a worried expression, "He was asking me how he could use magic." "No! You can't touch these with your dirty hands!" The angry middle-aged woman, who was the bookseller, slapped Sharon's hand away from the neatly arranged book on the shelf. Sharon nervously replied, "Can't I just have a little look at the book?" The bookseller responded angrily, "A commoner can't touch these expensive books. Do you think these books are the same as the practical books sold in those general stores? What are you going to do if these books look second-hand after you've touched them with your dirty hands?" Just then, someone opened the door, and the bookseller turned her head. A man wearing a suit entered and asked, "Have all the books I ordered arrived?" Sharon, with a worried expression, thought to himself, "They're really expensive. Where did Dad buy that book from, then?" The bookseller hurriedly went to welcome the man, saying, "Oh my, the landlord is here?" As Sharon was flipping through the pages of the book, the landlord noticed him, even though the bookseller was still talking to him about payment. "All of them have arrived. How would you like to pay for them?" the bookseller asked. Sharon couldn't help but think to himself, "This is the same. There isn't much information in it." He then left the bookstore saying, "To think it was this hard to look at a book, but I washed my hands, though," as he sniffed his hands. As he walked out, he spotted a man carrying a box filled with books and decided to follow him, curious if he was a noble and where he might be taking the books. Suddenly, the man flipped the box and dropped all the books to the ground. Sharon was shocked to see the expensive books being treated so carelessly. As he picked up a book from the pile, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the same place where his dad got the book from. He let out a sigh, feeling disheartened. While picking up a book, Sharon noticed two noblewomen talking and giggling as they passed by. A thought crossed his mind. Nobles? How are they different from me? This triggered a flashback of his dad telling him, "You must not run into nobles." Despite that, Sharon decided to follow the nobles, thinking to himself, "Why are they allowed, but I'm not?" As Sharon was following the nobles, he was suddenly stopped by the guards at an entrance. One of the guards grabbed him by the back of his collar, tightening his grip, and said, "This isn't a place where a kid like you can go around by yourself. Beyond this gate is the area for nobles. Where did you come from? Where are your parents?" Sharon felt frightened by how the guards were physically restraining him and bombarding him with questions all at once. As Sharon stammered, I mean, he's around here." The other guard grew suspicious, saying, "Hold on, isn't he a little too suspicious? I don't think he's a child from around here. I'm sure he's an orphan. Maybe he's an errand boy that those thieves are using." Sharon's face turned pale with fright, visibly shaken, and his eyes widened in fear. The guard turned to him with a cold stare and said, "Kid, you need to come with us." The guard's words were cut short as Sharon swiftly vanished, leaving the cardigan he had been wearing behind. The guards were caught off guard and had no idea when Sharon slipped away from their grasp. They quickly started searching, shouting, and blaming each other for letting a kid escape. Sharon had disappeared without a trace, leaving the guards bewildered and frustrated, unable to comprehend how the young boy had eluded them so effortlessly. But Sharon, in a quick moment of wit, had hidden himself just behind the garden wall, listening carefully to the guards' commotion. He waited patiently until they left in search of him, and then cautiously emerged from his hiding spot. He glanced around to make sure the coast was clear before stepping out from behind the wall. As he did, he shook his hair with his hand, trying to remove the leaves and dirt that had accumulated on his messy locks during his hideaway. He quickly straightened his clothes and took a moment to catch his breath and steady his nerves. At that moment, he looked down at his clothes, which had gotten dirty, and said to himself, "I'm going to get in trouble from Dad, right?" Sharon looked around and noticed that one of his shoes was missing. He lifted his head and found it lying near the wall. He went over and put it on, making sure it was securely on his foot. Just as he was adjusting his shoe, he heard the voice of an elderly man coming from over the wall saying, "Now then, let's talk about the topic of what is magic." Sharon's curiosity was piqued as he overheard the discussion about magic, since he had been incredibly curious about what it was. He had asked others before, but hadn't been able to get a satisfactory answer. Now, here was someone talking about magic in front of him. He then heard a kid's voice saying, "No, headmaster, show me how you extinguish the fire." Just as he was about to speak, Sharon realized that this place might be a magic school. His eyes widened with excitement as he blurted out, "Then this place is a magic school?" Sharon slowly inched closer, careful to remain hidden behind the wall as he strained his ears to catch every word. The voice of the headmaster replied to the kid, "I'm going to get in trouble if I use fire at school. Instead, if you get this question correct, I'll show you magic." He paused for a second and then continued saying, "What is needed the most in order to learn magic?" One of the kids shouted, "Wisdom!" while another exclaimed, "Effort! You need to study magic your whole life." Yet another suggested, "Money! It seems like you need to buy a lot of things." The headmaster chuckled and replied, "You have yet to tell us the correct answer." The group was engaged in a lively debate, discussing various perspectives on what magic truly was. Sharon listened intently, feeling a rush of excitement. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to finally understand the mystery of magic. He couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency to learn more, to unravel the enigma that had captivated his imagination for so long. Sharon's mind raced with thoughts as he listened to the ongoing debate about what is needed to learn magic. "So it's not wisdom, effort, or money," he mused to himself. "Then, do you need to be a noble?" He stood close to the wall, his ears pressed against it, listening intently, waiting for the headmaster to answer his question. Just then, the headmaster spoke. "The talent that is most crucial to learning magic is insight." Sharon's curiosity deepened. Insight? It was not an answer he had expected. One of the students looked puzzled and asked, "What's insight?" The headmaster replied, Does anyone here know what 1 plus 1 is?" One of the students confidently answered, "Who doesn't know that? Obviously it's 2, and then laughed. The headmaster followed up with another question. "Can anyone explain why it's 2? The student replied with confusion, "Huh? Because it's obvious," as he couldn't provide a further explanation. The headmaster continued his explanation. "That weird feeling you have right now is what's called insight. Those who lived long ago didn't know that 1 plus 1 was 2 until the efforts from countless scholars proved that it was. But we understand that 1 plus 1 is 2 without needing the complicated verification, right? Because from the existing rules of the world, beyond knowing things you learn, there are things that you need to feel and accept through conceptualization." Sharon listened attentively on the other side of the wall, fascinated by the headmaster's explanation of insight. He stood motionless, completely absorbed in the headmaster's words. And as magic, too, is a law that exists within the world, you need to feel it wholly and accept it through your insight. So insight is more accurate than wisdom and faster than effort. The students were amazed by the headmaster's explanation and exclaimed, "Wow, that's ingenious!" Sharon, too, was captivated by the concept of insight and its significance in learning magic. He listened intently to the headmaster's words, lost in deep thought about the possibility of becoming a mage himself. The headmaster replied to the student, "Ha ha ha, of course it's ingenious. Cultivate your talent and you too can become a mage." Sharon thought to himself, "Become a mage. Will a chance like that come to me too?" As he was deep in his thoughts, Sharon didn't hear the first part of what the headmaster said, but he suddenly heard, "Child who's standing behind the wall, I want to know what your thoughts are." Startled, Sharon's heart skipped a beat as he realized that the headmaster was talking to him. As Sharon stood in front of the wall, many thoughts raced through his mind. He felt startled and caught off guard, unsure of what to do. I got caught?" he thought anxiously. "Do I need to run away? Or should I reply? And on top of that, I look like a mess. I don't know what will happen." Sharon's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as he glanced at his disheveled appearance. He was torn between the impulse to flee and the obligation to respond to the headmaster's question. He felt a bead of sweat forming on his forehead as he struggled to come up with a coherent answer. But all of a sudden, a thought came to his. "If I don't jump one of this wall, I will regret it forever." Without wasting another moment, he started climbing the wall with all his might. As Sharon finally made it to the top of the wall, he was awestruck by the sight before him. The students were gathered in a circle, seated on the grass under a large tree. Beyond the tree was a grand school building, which looked more like a castle than a school. With a smile on his face, the headmaster asked, "Have you come to accompany this old man?" Chiron looked at them, closed his eyes, and made a bold decision. He then jumped over the wall to the other side.